Powered by STL Medical Weight Loss. See the Dr. Joe difference at stlmedweightloss.com.
Good morning and welcome to the Frank and Jill Show on the Big 550 KTRS YouTube, 550 KTRS TV. Watch us there. Royal Banks of Missouri, 84126. Great guest list today. Some really smart people. Melissa Price Smith, St. Louis County prosecutor, in studio at about 10:30. And then Anita Mannion, the UMSL political scientist. Jill, good to be with you. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Did you get to or did your husband get to the race?
We both did.
Wow. What'd you think?
We thought it was great. We were over at Worldwide Technology Raceways, of course, the Bommarito 500 yesterday, and everything from my perspective. Of course, I am definitely not what could be described as a huge auto racing fan.
You're
I know
a racing
very
novice.
little about that. I mean, I've been to a Formula One race in Austin, so I have, and I've been to various events with John through the years, as he prefers to be a driver than a spectator when he can be. But I really enjoyed everything about it. It was really fun. We didn't stay till the very end. The advantage of living 9 minutes away from the raceway is we decided to come home and watch the end of the race at home, and it was great.
But if you factor in like the weather, the crash, a pretty good finish, and the fact that crash, I want to be polite about this. We like to see crashes as long as nobody gets hurt, and nobody got hurt, which is amazing in racing. Isn't it unbelievable that those two guys walk out of there fine?
Yeah, and John really credits a change that happened in the last few years, which is that Halo device that's on top of the Indy cars now, because he skidded essentially what would have been on his helmet for, I don't know, probably 30 yards. And so to have that slight protection, definitely, he just walked away kind of frustrated, but not seriously hurt in any way.
So congrats to Curtis Francois and John Bommarito. We had Curtis on live after the event, and he said he had already gotten communication from IndyCar saying what an unbelievable event it was. Every driver we spoke to just gushed about it. Just really a cool event, and it was the biggest attendance-wise since COVID, since 2019. So, and credit to Fox for having the guts to put it on primetime, national television for the first time ever for IndyCar. So another great event for St. Louis sports.
Yeah, it was. I don't know how to estimate a crowd, and I don't know how to compare it to something else, but there were a lot of people there, and it went pretty smoothly in terms of parking
Yeah, tell
and
me
all
about
that kind of stuff. They had a lot of. I have to give a lot of credit to law enforcement. They were out almost in any juncture and saying, okay, you have this pass, you should park here. If you don't, this is where you need to go. You'll be shuttled over on buses. So it was just well communicated from my perspective. But we'd like to hear you guys' experience as well in the Royal Banks of Missouri text line 84126. Did you guys watch this St. Louis being promoted pretty well on the national scene on TV? Were you there live? Do you know anybody it was? What are you hearing? What's the report from those who either went to it or watched it last night?
All right. Why don't we break a little bit early today? We'll come back with our opening dialogue, and then Melissa Price Smith in studio, St. Louis County prosecutor. This is the Frank and Jill Show on the Big 550 KTRS.
Do you know why
KTRS. Good guest list today, Melissa Price Smith and Anita Mannion. So let's begin with thought one. As much as I absolutely love the Bommarito 500, I thought the most compelling sporting event of the weekend happened at Oakmont Country Club, the U.S. Open. It was kind of like, and I think we can all relate to this, the Hunger Games. Do you remember how treacherous that was? Remember what hell the contestants were put through? That's what it was like at the final round of the U.S. Open. In fact, all 4 rounds. It was so bad that Wyndham Clark smashed 2 lockers in the locker room. And keep in mind, these are 100-year-old lockers. It was so bad that Sam Burns, who had a chance to win the United States Open, was on 15 and his ball was in a puddle, and yet 2 USGA officials would not allow him to lift it out of there and put it 2 feet away from where there isn't a lot of water. That's how cruel they were. When you hit the fairway and the ball trickles into the rough and it's hidden like it's a treasure, you don't see your ball anymore. Wait a minute, my ball's in the fairway. No, it rolled out. Yes, it went to the rough and you can't see the ball anymore. Only 1 player under par, the greatest golfers in the world. And in the end, Jill, it was a guy who was 34 years old with 1 career win, who's 5'8", stocky, has diabetes, and his name is J.J. Spaun. The club was in the right slot. The tempo and the temperament were in the right place. J.J. Spaun, to make this such a beautiful Cinderella story, said last night that last year at this very time, he thought that he was going to have to find a job because it wasn't working out for him in golf. And then, wham, he turns in one of the greatest back nines in the history of the U.S. Open, shot 32. Remember, Johnny Miller shot 31 and wins $4 million. Can be on the Ryder Cup team. His life changed forever because of those 4 days in Oakmont, Pennsylvania. Jill, the night before his little baby was sick, he went to the equivalent of a Walgreens at 2:30 a.m. to get her some medicine. They said that when he was flying into Pittsburgh, and I can relate to this because Alex has 2 kids too, that a couple of the media members saw him getting off the plane and he had to get, the stroller, and he was carrying 6 bags and 2 kids. And now he's the most famous golfer in the world for 24 hours. It's such a beautiful story.
The things that you described as the factors, it sounds like, was it questionable officiating or just kind of how it goes sometimes? The luck doesn't go with you.
I thought that was terrible officiating when he should have gotten a drop out of the water.
And the rest of them were just, this happens to be a particularly challenging course.
Maybe the most challenging in the world.
And it really showed itself off to be that in this particular year.
It was crazy.
Okay. Well, you make it sound a lot more compelling than I find the actual experience of watching golf, but I'll take it. I like how interesting you make it. There was some tough news nationally over the weekend, of course. And Dean Phillips, who is a very famous businessman and Minnesota politician, wrote this morning, and I thought it was something compelling for us to think about. Over the past decade, as Congress and state and legislatures around the country become more populated by blowhards who care more about their own airtime than their constituents, state legislators Melissa Hortman and John Hoffman remain true to their principles. These are not flashy people. They didn't care about their brands. They cared about doing right. And nothing could have disgusted them more than baseless, shameful efforts by pundits wishing to make this tragedy a partisan issue and further divide Americans. Of course, he's talking about that Representative Hortman killed tragically over the weekend and Hoffman shot. Right now, you'll find people who are trying to twist the tragedy into yet another piece of destructive partisanship. That's the opposite of what Melissa and John worked for so relentlessly. We're learning more about the details of the suspect, Vance Belter, but it doesn't matter if the shooter is white, black, or brown. It doesn't matter if he's a Democrat or Republican or if he voted for Trump or Harris. It doesn't matter if he was an evangelical Christian or an atheist. What matters is that political violence is becoming normalized in America. When are we going to say enough is enough?
Yeah. And don't we need like a nice time period to pass before they even start? I mean, you should never get to these theories anyway because we lost lives, but to immediately go political on it when a family is destroyed.
Yeah, and I think, I heard Amy Klobuchar on the shows yesterday, and the media was, the interviewer was pushing her hard. What do you think is the reason? And she just kept coming back to, listen, we have got to think about this from a united front. And so when the politicians are the one trying to show the media and the rest of the world, this is the way that we need to behave in this situation. I think we all got to step back a bit.
Well put. All right. Thought two for me. As you know, I do love Italian food. Big fan of so many great Italian restaurants. John Minio's, Buzzetta's, John Minio's, Bartolino's, Paul Mano's, Il Balago, Trattoria Marsala. I said John Minio's twice. I like it so much. I want to say this. There's a place in St. Peter's, of all places, St. Peter's, Missouri, fine town, but not known as a hotbed for Italian restaurants, that gives you probably the closest you can get to pizza in Italy. It's called Nodo's, husband and wife team. They opened up, by the way, a northern Italian restaurant in the basement of Nodo's, and it's really cool. But the pizza is just insane. It really is. I wanted to smoke a cigarette afterwards. I had 3 of them. 3-ton wood fire oven, handcrafted in Naples, not Florida, Naples, Italy. And it's just scrumptious. And it's not expensive. 4 people, we ate a ton of food, and it was $66 a couple. So it's pretty good. And there was a couple of drinks too. So could not be more impressed with their pizza. It's just as good as you can get.
Well, I'm so thrilled to hear that because you were incredibly excited on Friday.
Yeah.
And sometimes, the amount of hype we give something ahead of time is conversely related to the experience we have. So it sounds like it delivered. On our way home from the racetrack last night, we did stop and get a pepperoni pizza from Pizzioli in Soulard, which is one of my 2 favorites in St. Louis. I love Pizza di Gloria on the Hill, but I love a wood-fired pizza. And man, Pizzioli's last night was just what the doctor ordered.
Now,
Very
that's
late
on the
dinner.
Hill?
No, that's in Soulard.
Okay, I've never been there.
It's really, really, if you like wood-fired pizza, not everybody does, but if you like that style of pizza, I think they deliver extremely well. It was very, very good. So almost 25 years ago, we were at our dear friend's dad's lake house at Lake of the Ozarks, floating in the water with our 3-year-old daughter. Well, the newborn took a nap in the house. We noticed a for sale sign at the neighbor's house and threw out some guesses what we thought this cute little house would sell for. As the afternoon went on, perhaps emboldened by some liquid courage, wrapped up in a towel, we knocked on the neighbor's door, the 2 couples, and asked about the house. Well, apparently the price seemed like a deal too good to be true, and by the end of the weekend, we had hatched a plan with our dear friends. None of us could probably really justify the investment and the challenge to our young 30-year-old family budgets, but before long, we were the proud co-owners of a quirky little house, a late 70s pontoon boat, and an early 70s ski boat. For 25 summers, we taught every one of our kids, every niece and nephew, and too many friends and neighbors to count, how to water ski, bait a hook, roast a marshmallow, and experience the good tired that comes from a day of playing hard in the water and sun. John MacGyvered us out of so many situations with all of our used, but better than the last boats we went through. We had some harrowing stories of racing back to the dock right before the skies opened up and the lightning struck. And I'll probably never find as much peace in my soul as I did on those early morning ski runs. When the kids were young teens, they occasionally complained about having to go to the lake once again. But then quickly in high school and college, the lake became the place for their friends to hang out with us all summer. Finally, this summer, it became clear for our 2 families with grown-up kids getting married that we had outgrown our shared space together. We've been pretty practical about the process, but as we get ready to hand the keys to a young family from here in the St. Louis area who's scheduled to take possession of it this week, when I saw all those kids' life jackets lined up in the bunk room closet we left behind for the new family, there was definitely a lump in my throat. Not the kind you get from regret or loss, just the one that reminds you that if you don't slow down and pay attention, 25 years can go pretty darn fast.
Wow. So it's official. 25 years. Huh. And you sold it for $2.5 million.
Oh boy, that would be so great. But no, considering what we paid for it, what we sold it for was okay. And it was certainly the most invaluable investment I think any of us ever made.
Huh. That's cool. That's a lifetime of memories in one little home, huh? That's
For
neat.
sure. Yep.
All right, let's take a short time out. When we come back, we're going to have Melissa Price Smith, St. Louis County prosecutor, in studio. Big 550 KTRS. In studio with us is Melissa Price Smith, the St. Louis County prosecutor, and we're excited to have you in. Welcome to the program. How are you?
Thank you so much. Doing well.
So right off the bat, like many people, when they have a job, it's something they've dreamed about for a long time. Like when Jill was 4 or 5 in Iowa, she one day thought, gosh, I wonder if I could work with Frank Cusimano.
Yeah.
But you, with this job, and I've read so many interviews, you had no idea and you did not dream about getting this job, even though it's a great job. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. I had no aspirations to be the prosecutor of St. Louis County. I've been in that office for 18 years. I've handled every kind of case, every kind of crime, but primarily the last several years, I've done sexual assault and child abuse cases. I have felt that that was my calling. That's what I would continue to do. That was where I was supposed to be. When Wesley Bell, when he won the primary and we all realized he was going to go to Congress, I, just like everyone else in my office, looked around and thought, I wonder who's going to be our next prosecutor, not thinking that it was going to be me. However, as I talked with my colleagues and thought about things, we all felt very, very strongly that the next prosecutor actually be a prosecutor, actually be somebody who worked in the office and who could hit the ground running, who knew the office inside and out. So I say I threw my hat in. I say we did. I did it with the support of all of my colleagues on behalf of all of us. And then, as you know, there was followed by quite a circus in the courts. But here I am. And as of January 3rd, I am now the first woman prosecutor of St. Louis County.
Wesley Bell came into the office on a platform of prosecutorial reform, looking for ways, in his words, to support reforming criminals instead of just recycling them through the system. In your opinion, did he make any headway on that front? And if so, or if not, is that part of your intention as you serve in this office?
Well, going back a bit, I was hired by Bob McCullough, worked for him for 10 years, then worked for Wesley Bell for 6 years. I learned a lot from both of them. I also will take what I've learned from both of them, and I want to take the office to the next level. I do agree with the diversion programs that Wesley Bell started. I think they're excellent programs. They are run by a very strong attorney in our office. We have a Veterans Court, DWI Court, Drug Court, and Mental Health Court. And these courts, which Wesley started, are all very important. Basically, what they are for offenders who commit low-level, nonviolent offenses, it gives them an opportunity to get some help, avoid a conviction, and really change the trajectory of their lives. I think these programs are excellent. I think they are a part of the criminal justice system. And I've said this many times, and I'll continue to say it. If there were drug courts 40 years ago, I'm convinced my brother would be alive today. I think they are life-changing, and they are very important. So I applaud the fact that he started that, and I will obviously keep it in the office.
I want to talk a little bit about your history. You had a prolific career actually in the courtroom. You're over 100 cases, probably?
Well, I've handled hundreds of cases. I've tried 35, 40 plus felony jury trials.
And that's a really high number if you look at the percentage
Sure.
of attorneys in St. Louis. How do you think that's prepared you for this job, actually being in the courtroom?
I, again, along with my colleagues, we all felt strongly that the person leading the office this time be a prosecutor who knew the office, who had been in the office, who had tried cases, who knew exactly, and who, as I know exactly, what the prosecutors in my office are doing, who knows how to step in and try a case, who knows what it's like to do a motion, who knows what it's like to sit with victims and prepare them for trial, or to sit with victims after a trial when it doesn't go your way. It's important to the strength of our office, we believe, that the person in my chair has done the work and knows the ins and outs of the office.
I have been with folks who work very hard in the prosecutor's office, both in the city and county. And at times, people from the public will say things like, well, how come you didn't get that guy? Or why did you let that person go? What would you say the public generally gets wrong or misunderstands about the work you do?
Thank you for asking that question. I hear all the time things like, oh, this person got off because they had so-and-so for a lawyer, or because of this reason or that. What people don't understand, they may see a case in the news, in the media, and not be happy with the result. They don't know the background. They don't know that maybe there was an offer of something that the public thinks Why did they offer only that many years or only probation? But what they don't know, it might be a child case. Children have to testify. It might be a case where a parent said, my child's never coming in. It might be a case where we've lost our witnesses. It might be a case where the victim's family has asked us to do a certain recommendation. So I think what I would ask the public to do is not quickly assume when they hear a disposition of a case what the reason is, because there's so many reasons cases get disposed of certain ways, whether by probation or years in Department of Corrections, that we're not allowed to share. But there are a lot of reasons. And I will tell you, if I have a case and the attorney on the other side, the defense attorney, is a high-powered, expensive attorney versus a public defender, I do not change anything that I do in terms of recommendation, in terms of how I try my case. There are no favors. And I think oftentimes the public thinks that there are.
Explain to me what the case backlog is. Like how many when you first got in and what you've gotten it down to now.
When I arrived, we had a backlog of about 6,000 felony cases that had not even been reviewed. Obviously very concerning. Right now, we have cut it by about half. I think people are probably out there listening saying, why haven't you cut it further? You have 55 attorneys. Because we get cases constantly. We are making sure now to stay current with our cases so we don't get an additional backlog. I will tell you, though, the people in this office are so incredible. The last 2 weekends, I sent out an email asking for volunteers on a Saturday. We work for the government. There's no pay there. Can't offer money, can't offer them anything. I asked if they'd come in, and we had 20 people, 2 weekends in a row, people just coming in to help, attorneys coming in, support staff, because everybody in the office wants to take this office to the next level and get caught up.
Yeah. Why do you do this instead of work for a private firm where your salary would be double, triple, quadrupled?
I love this office. I grew up in this office. I truly love what I do, and I believe I am meant to do this. I am a prosecutor. I'm not a politician, and I am not using this office as a stepping stone to go anywhere. Obviously, I have to go through an election process now, but I believe we have done great work in these last 6 months, and I hope to be able to go forward and continue doing it because I really care about this office. I care about the victims. I care about the attorneys. We've created some great trial teams that I'd love to tell you about. And I really do care, but it's not just me. It's the people in the office, attorneys, support staff, victim advocates, investigators.
Wow. What would you say is the biggest challenge in your office right now, and what are you guys doing to address it?
Well, as soon as I came in, there are a couple of things we've done to address some very important things. We had a violent crime unit that was suspended 2 years ago. I was sworn in the morning of January 3rd. We reinstated the violent crime unit that afternoon. That was something that I felt was a challenge that we fixed immediately. Since January 3rd, our violent crime unit has issued approximately 160 violent crime cases. The other thing we did is we recruited 3 amazing veteran attorneys from the U.S. Attorney's Office. And one of them we brought to our office to run a new homicide unit that we just developed, which I think is so very important. That's Mike Riley. The other one we brought is a woman named Carrie Costanton, an incredible veteran prosecutor. We brought her to be our chief trial attorney. We also brought a man named Jerry McDonald to the office. He also used to work here. So the 3 people that we recruited came back. They used to work here, which shows to me how much they love this office and the vision of this office. And they also want to be a part of taking it to the next level.
So you came into the position in the middle of a term. Will you run in the next election?
Absolutely. The primary is in August of 2026. Yes, I will run. And this is the part that I don't like.
Because you're not a politician
I
by
am
nature.
not a politician at all. And what I wish I could just be able to continue doing my job based on the work I've done. And the work, by the time the primary comes along, August 26th, we will have done even more great things. I wish I could continue doing my job just based on that without having to win an election. But
So you've never campaigned or done anything like that ever?
I have never done that. I have some great people helping me, but I will assure you, I am still spending the majority of my time in the office. I am in the office every day, and I will continue to do that. I'm not putting my work as a prosecutor aside to campaign. I will do it alongside. because I know it's necessary evil to be able to continue doing this great work.
What is, you call it great work. Give us an example of something that's been particularly rewarding for you, an impact that you had, that your work and your colleagues' work was able to have on a victim or in a situation that helps sort of keep you going at this highly stressful, as Frank pointed out, not as financially lucrative as other law careers job that you've chosen.
Well, for years and now, the reason I get out of bed in the morning is the victims on the cases. In doing the cases I have done in the past, the sexual assault and child abuse, I have met some of the bravest people I've ever met in my life. These are people that have been through the storm of their life and trust us to get them through the judicial process, which is not an easy process. I say this every time I get the opportunity: disclosure leads to healing, and we encourage every victim to disclose. So because I feel so strongly, I am trying to make our office a more victim-centered office. We are getting out, doing much more community outreach. And not only are we trying to reach young people to help them understand that there are other choices so they don't get involved in a life of crime, but we are also extending it to try to reach more victims. I think it's so easy to say, you should disclose. Disclosure leads to healing. There are so many people out there in these communities who have no idea what that means or who we are. So every time we get out into the community, to a high school, to a town hall, to a neighborhood watch, and we talk to them about our victim advocates and who we are and how we surround them with a team and how important their voice is, it not only helps these offenders to make better choices, but it helps the victims. So many victims out there are repeat victims, either of the same offender or multiple offenders. So we're trying to make our office more victim-centered, and that to me is so, so important.
Speaking of victims, I had a buddy who worked on sex crimes in the city, and we'd go to lunch, and every once in a while he would tell the story, and the whole table would just get quiet for a minute. We were just blown away. I'm wondering, when you're in the middle of these, how consuming and how blown away about some of the hideous things that you've seen and heard.
It's I will tell you, it is shocking, the things that I see in these cases. And then every third, fourth case, then I'll read it and think, I didn't know it could get worse. But we in the prosecutor's office see humanity at its absolute worst, and it's easy to lose faith in humanity. But like I said, I go right back to the victims. Even after losing faith in humanity, when I read these horrible facts, then my faith goes right up because I see these incredible, strong people who are able to come forward, which reminds me of why we're doing this every single day.
What about your relationship with Sam Page? Obviously, you were not his first choice. How do you characterize it now? Do you always have that in the back of your mind? Is it a strictly professional relationship? What do you see?
Yeah, I was not Sam Page's top choice at all. And it became quite a circus. In fact, I didn't even know I had this position, even though the governor had appointed me. The courts hadn't decided till the morning I was sworn in. In terms of Sam Page, though, I had faith in the judicial system the entire time this decision was in the courts. And I was appointed by Governor Parson, such an honor. And I believe the courts made the right decision in saying Governor Parson had the pick and he chose me. Sam Page and I now have the same goal, and it's to make St. Louis County safer. I am not thinking about the fact that I wasn't his choice. He and I work together, and I intend to continue working with him to make St. Louis County safer.
You have a twin sister in the business in your office?
I have an identical twin sister. Her name is Teresa Baumkamp. She was a prosecutor in our office for 26 years. She left a year ago to go into private practice, but we worked together for years handling. She also did sexual assault and child abuse cases. She's the best trial attorney I know, and she taught me everything I knew in the courtroom because she had been in the office 26 years. I've been there 18.
Wow. And what's it like having a mom who still looks like she's 40? Tell me about your mother, who everybody loves and likes.
My mother is my role model. She was the executive director of Men's Group Against Cancer for years, where she raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for local cancer communities. Now she works for local cancer organizations. Now she works for Make-A-Wish Foundation, an incredible organization. My mom has always been my inspiration about living your life to make a difference.
Awesome. Well, you were tough to book, but you were worth it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That is Melissa Price-Smith, St. Louis County prosecutor. We'll take a short time out. We'll be right back after this.
Hey.
who are doing incredible work and really smart people who'd have the choice of doing a lot of things, but are choosing to do something for the good of humanity and the world. And I'm inspired by it, and it makes me want to be a better person. And then I also sometimes feel about this big at the end of it,
Yeah.
because I'm going, yeah, I could, there's a lot more I could do to be making the world a better place on a daily basis.
Well, I do think like that whole money thing and Gabe Gore in a situation like that, if he's at Dowd Bennett, isn't he making 5 times what he's making?
Probably at least.
Yeah. And
or
if
in that
she
similar-
wanted to go to an elite firm, she could make quite a bit more.
Right.
And
And you
then-
and I've talked about this before, though. In the other work I do when I have my hat on outside, my other hat on outside the radio station, there is very little correlation between once you get above the poverty level, between having tons and tons of money and being a lot happier than other people. So I think that doing values-based work and having your work matter to you is actually extremely important. I know you don't always believe me when I say that, but the data does back me up on that.
I know a young attorney who's a friend of the family who said recently that he wishes he would get fired. I mean, that's how toxic and how much work and just what the whole atmosphere is like. Can you imagine that?
And I hear that from corporate executives all the time. I hear that from physicians doing some of the most important work in the world, but just the system is wearing them down, that sometimes their fantasy is that they'll get either sick or fired, and that's the freedom or the out they want. And I always say that's a sign that we need to be thinking about life differently and reorchestrating things in a way that serves you better, because that's not doing anybody any favors when that's what you are. That's kind of the place you're on. I wanted to say we had a chance over the weekend. We had for just a short visit from some out of town family, in addition to lake house shenanigans and all the things we had going on. And we went to McGurk's, and it was beautiful weather on Saturday. The City SC game was over. The Cardinals game was over. It was packed, and it just was the most joyful, spirited, enjoyable experience. There were young couples there with their kids. There were people in their 80s there. There were fraternity brothers. There were, people that looked like they were CEOs. It was just such a nice, fun mix of people, and it was packed, and they handled everybody well. But what do you think in terms of summertime vibe patio places that you love in St. Louis? Is there anything better than McGurk's?
Pretty good. I mean, Cafe Napoli's really got that great thing in Clayton. That outdoor stuff's pretty cool.
Bishop's
Great
Post out here in Chesterfield
people
has
watching
incredible
place.
patio.
Let's see.
The young people who were extended family that ended up spending the night with us that we took there, they'd spent a couple hours at Ballpark Village downtown in the afternoon. Couldn't say enough about how cool they thought that was. They've never been to St. Louis before.
Wonder what Ballpark Village is like on a beautiful day that there's not Cardinal baseball. Is it popping and rocking?
They said there were a lot of people down there eating, drinking, watching other sports games on the big TV, and then they had some kind of a futsal tournament or game down there, and so they kind of watched that as well, which they said was really fun in the open courtyard there. So yeah, they gave it a giant thumbs up.
All right, we got some other kind of stream of con thoughts that we cut short our opening dialogue. Let me see. Oh, I have a quick thought on Caitlin Clark. She returned from injury Saturday and just put on a show with 32, 9, and 8. It was electric. And, I was thinking about this. Could she turn into the single most electrifying sports figure we have for a few months in the United States? I mean, because I'm wondering, with the NBA and the NHL about to end and only one golf major left and no NFL right now, I wonder, I would rather watch her play than Shohei Ohtani hit. If she could just rise over everybody. It's just, I can't get enough of her.
Of course, you're preaching to the choir on that. I, of course, was very excited that she was back from the injury. Very excited that the Fever beat the Liberty, and even though they were the underdogs going into the game, and she came back so strong, and she was hitting those threes. And John and I were talking about it later in the day. I said, can we go over and watch a Fever game? And he's on the computer. He's like, well, that'd be awesome. Here's how much it'll cost us to get last minute tickets. And we were looking at the calendar. We haven't pulled the trigger yet, but we're definitely going to do it. I mean, it's just,
I'd love to know
watching her.
In fact, Connor, if you do a little research, what would be a really good seat now for a Fever game? I've seen some WNBA tickets really, really moderately priced, but she transcends the league.
Well,
and
you
they sell
can-
out every game.
I can tell you, he said that you can get nosebleed seats for $20, and so
Yeah.
and I've had friends that have taken like kids or their whole basketball team to see.
But I know you're
that.
kind of a social climber and a mover and a shaker, and you want to sit front row and maybe get on a cutaway.
Yeah, if there's one thing I love to do, it's spend and blow money. I think that's my MO for sure. But no, you and I are on the same page on that 100%. I love watching her play, and I love the attention she gets. I think it's very well deserved.
Connor's squinting his eyes. Looks like he may have something.
So they're going to play in Las Vegas here this next week, and if you want like lower bowl, it looks like you're paying $100 to $200.
Okay.
So kind of in that good seat section.
And
thing.
is that a fact that she sells out every place she plays? And I mean, they have to find bigger places than WNBA Arena sometimes.
I'm not sure. Where do you think they play in Las Vegas? They probably just play in the hockey arena, right?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, 100%. So I know we've talked a lot about food, but I'm going to throw another one out there. John asked him where he wanted to go for lunch on Father's Day, and he said Peacemaker. We haven't been there for a minute.
Did you have the lobster roll?
We did not have the lobster roll, but I love their lobster roll. We had the Lyonnaise salad with fried oyster. It was to die for, as good as
Wait,
anything.
say that one more time.
Lyonnaise, as in Lyon, France, which is a
Okay.
kind of French salad with a fried oyster. And then the crawfish po' boy, which is John's favorite. They have the Peacemaker out at Lambert now
They have one in Kirkwood also.
in the
Yeah.
Terminal 2. And he's gotten it on the way to a trip to and from. And he said it's one of his best sandwiches
Okay,
ever.
that's
Loves
interesting to
it.
hear that it's as good at the airport as it is at one of the.
And so he was kind of craving that. And he said, can we go do that and split, a salad and this sandwich? And we also they had fried green tomatoes with a remoulade sauce that was to die for, red cabbage slaw. So good.
How much more expensive is it at the airport one?
That's
It
the
was
point.
because the crawfish po' boy was
Yeah.
not particularly expensive at the restaurant. I mean, it's expensive. It's not a cheap sandwich, but I think it was like $16, which in today's world with a side is not the most expensive. And at the airport, I think it was $20. So it was more expensive, but it
Yeah.
wasn't crazy.
I got to play a round of golf early on Father's Day before I had to go in with Brooke, Dom, and Alex, and Brooke brought Old Town Donuts, which is wow. That's a religious experience.
And how did you fare against your
Well, you think on
semi-pro
Father's
golfer
Day, I would-
kids?
They caught a break and hit the ball well, but still, yeah, they blew
Well,
me
and
away.
Brooke's getting pretty pregnant there.
Yeah, it's
not
embarrassing
impacting her
to
game.
Get the tar beaten out of you by a woman that's 7 months pregnant. It's just like, oh my God, when are you going to slow down?
I mean, if you can't beat her now,
yeah.
you're thinking you're never going to beat her.
Well, how about this though, Connor? What if she has the baby and doesn't play for a while?
Oh, you're
and
saying
I'm really going
maybe if she gets rusty
Yes.
and you're still
Rust.
golfing every single
it's the
day.
only way.
Meanwhile, he's saying stuff to her when he's talking to her, like, "Hey, Brooke, I really think it's prioritizing children and taking care of children
Exactly.
now. You
Don't
shouldn't
play
be
for a
out.
while."
You shouldn't be
Yeah.
out on the course too much."
I mean, I was late for the Van Slyke interview today because I was working on something this morning at the range because I was so ticked off that she beat me. I mean, I'm
And
never going to beat Alex, but I can beat Dom. So
okay, so what's the order then? Does it go Alex, Brooke, you? I mean, you and Dom, or Dom and you?
no, me and then Dom.
Okay.
Dom's still got too much of baseball in him to be good at golf.
Is he going to catch up at some point though?
Eventually?
Because he's got a lot of you in
Yeah,
him in that
yeah.
way. He is, or is he just going to put all his efforts at killing you in pickleball?
Maybe that's a good point also. So, all right. The name of the pizza place, by the way, is Noto in St. Peter's, and please get a reservation because it's a tough place to get a reservation.
Yeah, and we have a question that came in specifically about a specific case for Melissa Price Smith that we had a little bit earlier in the show, and unfortunately, sometimes the we couldn't ask her about that while she was here because, among other reasons, the text sometimes lag a little bit, so we didn't get it before she got here. So apologies for that. Somebody else asking me earlier in a private text and at the station. I always talk about John working on his car on a free weekend if he ever has one, what he has, and it is a 68 Corvette. I should remember that because that's the year I was born. I once said 67 on the air. Apparently that's a lot fancier car than a 68 Corvette.
And
So.
do you know what the engine is in that 68? Is it a Stingray?
Great questions.
And what color?
It's an a Le Mans blue, I think they call it. It's a kind of an electric blue is how I
Oh,
would
yeah.
describe it. It's very pretty.
A Corvette blue. Yeah.
Yes. I will
can see
ask
that.
him the Stingray question and have that for you coming up in our next hour for sure.
All right, we'll take a short time out. When we come back, she's Anita Mannion, the UMSL political scientist, and she's going to be a big guest lecturer at an UMSL Foundry speaker series very soon.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. The Foundry is saying, hey, we're going to provide all kinds of different excitement for you. We talked about Mark Maxwell playing in his band there. They have another kind of unlikely beer and fun way that they're combining a way that you can learn and have a really good time together. We'll tell you all about that. But first, we're going to tell you about our friends at OxyFresh. Of course, OxyFresh, I've always been a huge fan because I like the owners and I like the way they run their business and I like the way that I like the people that they have working for them. But I also love the results, and I got excellent results when they came out to my house. I can now say I'm a very happy customer of OxyFresh and the work that they do. They came to my house and did upholstery cleaning as well as area rug cleaning as well. And here are a couple of the other customers or clients recently and what they gave us. Somebody said, thanks so much for the work that you guys did. You explained things thoroughly. Our carpets looked fantastic, even though the technician had to work very, very hard. We're pleased with the experience. Things couldn't have been better. Another one talking about that they had tried using another company before with some stains and been told, just give it up. You're going to have to replace this carpet. And instead, the OxiClean team came in and were able to get it looking like new. That's about the best any of us could ask for, to have our old carpet looking like new again. If you want to have these kind of results at your house, reach out to our friends at OxyFresh. All you have to do is give them a call at 877 OxyFresh or go to oxyfresh.com.
The text you
Staples presents That
studio, Anita Mannion. She is the UMSL political scientist, and she's going to be a guest lecturer at the UMSL Foundry Speaker Series. It's going to be Wednesday night, 6:30. Lectures on Tap is the official title. Tell me about it and why we should go.
Yeah, well, first of all, if you haven't been to the live art market on City Foundry on Wednesday nights, it's great. I'm going to be the most boring part there. They have drinks.
And you're not
and-
boring, so
Thank
that's
you.
a good sign.
They have drinks and food and live artists and musicians, and so it's wonderful. Mark Maxwell performed there last week.
Oh, that's where he performed?
That's right.
Oh, my gosh. He thinks he's Bruce Springsteen now.
Well, maybe he is. And so I will be talking about some research about how folks can get involved in local government and what our local government looks like here in Missouri.
Yeah, I'm excited about it because I think it's just one of those things where it's like anytime we can have a little fun and learn something at the same time, and I think it's an innovative way that we're getting people out and about, and to your point, connected to what matters to us, because we sometimes get overwhelmed and we want to ignore what's happening in our local world and local government, and I think the disadvantage of that is when we get more divided from each other. So I'm going to ask you, we had two big events. If you were a President Trump fan over the weekend, you might have thought that the military parade was an effective way to rally veteran support, 250 years of the Army, and watch it on Fox News and thought it was great. If you're not a big fan of President Trump, maybe not so much. Would you say that, we'll start with that event, effective, divisive? What are your thoughts on it?
I think the idea of this military parade was divisive because people think of these demonstrations from like Russia and North Korea, right? These big military parades. But I think for a lot of people, ultimately, the parade ended up being more like of a history lesson than, some really big controversial display of power. But it also was President Trump's birthday, and it also cost tens of millions of dollars. So there's lots of kind of back and forth about. And in the world we're in today, everyone's going to see it through their own partisan lens.
And I guess it's too early to say on this Monday morning, but the law and order messaging he's trying to portray as a response to the protest, does he end up winning the public opinion battle on this?
That's a good question. The polling so far shows that people slightly disapprove of the protesters and also slightly disapprove of Trump's response, right? So right now, neither side is sort of the clear winner. But what research and what history shows us is that when it comes to protests, the goal is really to have enough conflict and drama to draw media and public attention to your issue, but to try to do that in a peaceful way. And so that's a tight line to walk there. And so because if you're just having a very peaceful, boring protest that causes no disruption, then you're not going to get any coverage, right? So how do you get that coverage, but also do it in a way that the public supports? So think of like the civil rights protests. So I think the risk that Trump runs here with bringing the military and the National Guard in is if the government, the state, is seen to be excessive in their force or violence, there can be a real backlash.
Oh.
So think about the fire hoses on civil rights marchers
Yeah.
and things like that.
I've always wanted to know, and you two could both answer this question. I've never seen a poll where I know Trump in general, at least part of the reason he got elected was because of his stance on immigration.
Right.
But if the poll question was asked specifically like this, do you want illegal immigrants who've never committed a crime and are functioning members of society removed? Where do you think America would stand if you ask it that way?
I think the question has been framed kind of in that way. They've asked about different groups of people who were brought here as children, people who have jobs here recently. And overwhelmingly, people think that criminals should be deported, people who have committed crimes beyond just being here illegally.
But the way I ask it,
Yeah, I think people would support that. So overall, people are supported President Trump's stance on immigration, but now that they see people, like we just saw in Missouri, the Save Carol movement, they see people in their communities being removed that they see as sort of like, quote unquote, law-abiding citizens.
Yeah. What do you think? You think that's a 50-50 or 70-30 that people do not want illegal aliens who've never committed a crime who have contributed to society?
I couldn't agree with what Professor Mannion said more, that it's one of those things where we like one idea in our mind is I want the people who are doing wrong out. And then the humanity, we have this human side. We're like, wait, the people I know, or from the practical perspective, obviously the lobbying efforts of the farm workers and the hospitality workers got to President Trump because he came back with what many considered a giant his supporters would say clarification, his detractors would say flip on that particular position. Do you think that the real issue here is that we have such a broken process for getting people through the naturalization and path to citizenship here in the United States? Because I think that's what a lot of Americans are saying is it's a political issue that gets thrown at us, but really we just got to fix this system, and that's a job for Congress.
100%. And we absolutely need a clearer legal path if we want to kind of solve this problem. And, it might not be even citizenship. I saw Rand Paul speaking, yesterday, and he was suggesting maybe a stronger worker system where you have a work visa, you're not a citizen, but you could be here legally and work, so there could be different tiers of what that looks like. But right now, there aren't many legal options, and people who are trying to get that better life for their family are coming here illegally.
Okay, so I watched Bill Maher on Friday. Senator John Fetterman was on hand, and he just is a very impressive guy. But can a guy who wears a hoodie and looks the way he looks win the president of the United States? Speaks common sense, wants to cross the aisle, agrees with Republicans on some things, has a lot of strengths, but could he win?
Well, I think that hoodie and the whole look there is part of what people see as his authenticity, right? He's genuine. He's not Gavin Newsom with the perfect hair and the perfect suit, right? That he is who he is. And that he also, to your point, takes positions that sometimes are not the Democratic Party line. And
especially pro-Israel.
That's absolutely probably the most glaring one, and the one that his staff has pushed back on. If he chose to run for president, I suspect they would have to get him at least in a button-up shirt, right?
Well, but I think he represents something that a lot of people seem to, at least it looks like from the outside, those people who aren't diehards Republicans or Democrats or are frustrated with both parties, and that he seems to have a willingness to speak truth to power beyond whatever political affiliation it is. And so I'm wondering, I read something the other day that Democrats are floundering because they've been used to being the party of disruptors. And President Trump came in and said, I'm going to be the disruptor. And so now the Republicans are taking this on. And a lot of things that used to be, there's more government regulation instead of less in a lot of cases. And there's stuff that used to be Democratic issues like tariffs that we're going to take over. Is it going to take an even bigger disruption from the Democrats to combat that? Or do Democrats need to become the more centered, if you will, party in order to shift things?
Yeah, I really think they're trying to find their footing there right now because there has been this disruption, and Trump takes positions that aren't traditionally Republican positions, right? And we're seeing even Josh Hawley kind of take some of these more populist positions on minimum wage and Medicaid. And so then how do the Democrats counter that? And I think that's what they're trying to figure out. Do they try to tack to the center or do they take this strong, bold stance? And we've seen, whether you're seeing the Sanders and AOC kind of tacking to the left or Gavin Newsom sort of tacked to the middle, but now with what's happening in LA seems to be taking this kind of bolder stance.
Yeah. Did he help himself with the statement, arrest me, tough guy?
I think if you're a Democrat, you like that. If you're someone who, is not a fan of President Trump, you like that. And I think if you're someone who is a fan of President Trump, you already didn't like Gavin Newsom. So I don't think he had anything to lose with saying that.
It's just such a heart-rending story. The what appears to be potentially politically motivated shootings in Minnesota. And I happen to have a high school friend who worked for Representative Hortman, and her post this morning was just heartbreaking about what a dedicated, Sunday school teacher, somebody who really cared about public service, pretty nonpartisan in a lot of the stuff that she brought forward on behalf of the people of Minnesota. We keep saying this happened, whether it was the incredible, terrible shooting that happened at the congressional baseball game a few years ago, the firebomb at Governor Shapiro's home. We wail and gnash our teeth about this. But what has to be done to get past this place where your political views are going to get you killed if you're a political leader in our country?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking and is devastating, not just for those families, those communities, I think for our country as a whole. And what I've noticed over the last couple of days is this isn't the one thing we're all focusing on, right? because it has become normalized. We saw an assassination tip on President Trump. We've seen those acts of violence that you've talked about, and it's almost becoming normalized. Someone going to Nancy Pelosi's home and attacking her husband. And I think that
Senator Shapiro.
yes, absolutely. And I think it's a horrible commentary
Governor.
of the state of political violence in the United States. I think that we are in a situation where between the rhetoric coming out of some of our elites, what we see on social media, this idea that we have totally different worldviews and we're getting totally different information, that we're so isolated and dehumanize each other. And I think that's the fundamental problem. If we get to know each other as humans, oh, that person teaches Sunday school in my community. They're a good parent. They have these redeeming qualities, even though I might disagree with them about taxes, right? Or immigration. And, that's what I would like to see is some more of those conversations across the aisle.
Great thought. What do you make of Josh Hawley over the last 3 months? It seems like every other week, Joe Holloman is writing a piece about how he's reaching across the aisle. Is he thinking 2028? Because if he is,
100%.
but ahead of him, I mean, dramatically ahead of him right now would be Vance, Rubio, and DeSantis. What about that?
Yeah, but it will be an open primary. And so I think both on the Democratic and Republican side, we're going to see large competitive primaries, everyone throwing their hat in the ring. And it seems pretty clear to me that Josh Hawley is, positioning himself for that run.
Wow. And how do you think he would do against a Vice President Vance?
Oh, that's a good question.
Does it depend on how this run ends? I mean, how the Trump presidency ends?
That's right.
Because if it bombs out, then J.D. Vance, even if he is the vice president, is not going to get elected.
Yeah. And, J.D. Vance, well, I think he will benefit from his association with President Trump. If you remember on the campaign trail, he had some missteps. He wasn't always the, best campaigner or the most charismatic speaker. And so I think when it comes to the actual campaign, we'll have to see what happens. And if Trump endorses anyone. He has said it could be Rubio, it could be Vance. He hasn't committed to anything.
But what about DeSantis's run in Florida, which seemingly has been pretty successful? Now, he got out of the campaign pretty quickly because he didn't smile and he really he just didn't have campaign ability.
Right.
But maybe you learn. I mean, there have been plenty of guys that have failed, have come back, Nixon, Reagan, stuff like that.
True.
What about DeSantis long term? Because that run in Florida seems to be pretty successful.
Yeah, I think he does a lot of things that are popular with the Republican base, that's what matters in primaries. And he's effective at governing. He gets things done. But again, he kind of floundered in the primaries. He had he has 4 years to get his act together.
Yeah, that's really good. And if you're just joining us, Anita Mannion, of course, political science professor at UMSL, it sounds like in the way that you posited the sadness about what's happening in terms of political divisiveness leading to violence in our country, that you'd like to see us come together in a lot of ways as a voting populace. Specifically, do you think that getting more involved locally at what matters to us locally, that's a passion of yours? You do a lot of research on this. We had Senator Danforth on a couple of weeks ago talking about his friend Kit Bond dying. And one of the things he said was, we crossed the aisle a lot because we got down to what was impacting our constituents locally, and we were able to work together on that. What are your thoughts on how we come together?
I couldn't agree more. And I think, these nationalized politics, we used to say all politics are local, but now it's like all politics are national. You can't even have the conversation at the local level, even the school board level, without national politics coming into it. And I think that's unfortunate. And I will say one thing that we tend to see is that women in legislatures will work together across the aisle, particularly to work on certain issues like
better than
healthcare.
men.
It seems to be that way. Look at the Missouri State Legislature, and the women there will tell you, we have lunch together, we do these things together. They wrote a book together across the aisle, and that they try to work on those things because they tend to coalesce around certain issues. And so that's one reason I think it's really important to focus on local government, on the boards and commissions, which are not elected positions, so they're a little less political.
Well, we could have you in every week. You are great, Anita. We really appreciate it. And if you want to see Anita in person, Foundry, 6:30 Wednesday, lectures on tap. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. A little bit of business before we go to break.
Yeah, I'm sitting here listening to the rain fall pretty heavy once again on the rooftop. And I know some of you at home might be having the same experience, and some of you are just dreading, do I go downstairs and see if where the water's coming in has started leaking again? If that's how you feel every time it rains, guess what? there is a solution for your problem. That is reaching out today to our friends at Woods Basement Systems. It's one of those things a lot of us procrastinate, cross our fingers, hope, and then there comes a time when we're like, guess what? This problem is getting so big, it's going to impact not only the value of my home, but my family's ability to live here safely in the long term. And that's when you know the time has come for you to reach out. If you're at that point where you're in near crisis, or you're at the point where you're like, gosh, that one little tiny leak or that one little tiny crack might be getting a little bit bigger. Wherever you are on that spectrum, you have somebody who has an excellent reputation with the Better Business Bureau, with their customer base, at making sure that they take care of the problem for you. WoodsBasementSystems.com, 618-708-4055.
Becoming a truck driver doesn't have to be complicated. At Schneider, we make it easy to get your
28 on this Monday morning. Frank and Jill show. Jill Farmer, Frank Cusimano. Really glad you're with us. Do you feel like you've learned a lot today?
Yes. We've had two really smart people in.
Yeah, and really good at communicating things in a way that makes you think about it a little bit differently. Do you think it's because we just asked such amazing questions? Otherwise,
It's probably part of it.
yeah. Actually, I think we could have said nothing, and it probably would have been better for everybody. They're both so good at what
But they're
they
both
do.
so engaging too. A lot of respect for both of us.
Yeah, I told Anita Mannion on Wednesday night I've got a conflict, but I'm going to try to switch it around because I really want to go hear her talk and have a beverage on a beautiful summer night and learn something new at the Foundry.
Always gets back to alcohol with you, doesn't it?
Yeah, every time. That's how I start. By the way, before we get to the song of the day and the quote of the day, I got some furious texts, not angry furious, but quick texts from people in my life who know, who are much sharper brained than me, to remind me that when you ask the question about John's Corvette, small block Stingray convertible 4-speed, for those who care.
That is what we would call a BITCHIN car.
Yeah. And
That is
will
sharp.
it leave my brain almost instantly as soon as I've said this? Yes, it will. And next time I'll say, Frank, what was that car? Again, poor John.
It's interesting that the things you care about, you remember. The things you don't, just like boom. forget it.
I'm very proud of him rebuilding this car bolt by bolt. I just can't keep all the details straight always. Today has been a very Monday-y Monday, besides our 2 hours on the air today. So I thought this song of the day would reflect that. Been on the charts.
No, I know it's the Mamas and Papas. What would that be, in the mid 60s?
Yeah, good. 1966, number one on the Billboard Hot 100 chart.
And there was a famous singer, was it Michelle Phillips? And she had a famous daughter? Oh, wait a minute. Did she have a famous daughter?
Yeah. So
Connor, what do you know?
Wilson Phillips was.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that group. Those were progeny of those guys living their crazy lives back in the 60s as well. But I don't have all of it straight. Who was with who? Do you remember that?
I do not.
Wasn't she like later in one of these TV shows? Oh,
yes.
gosh.
In not was it
it
not
Dynasty?
Dynasty or Knots Landing or something
Knots
like
Landing.
that.
I don't think it was Knots Landing.
That's right, because you were a Knots Landing aficionado.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she was definitely an actress and lived a very interesting life as a Monday. Somebody else pointing out another good Monday song is Just Another Manic Monday. Quote of the day today. If you haven't heard it
Oh,
yet,
it was Knots Landing. Wait a minute.
it was.
She appeared for the 30th celebration of Knots Landing. I don't remember her. Huh.
Her
Okay.
daughter is married to Billy Baldwin. So
Okay.
there
I
you
did
go.
not know that
Is
either.
that what you're thinking
China
of?
Yeah.
Phillips,
Yeah,
right?
these
Is that,
like C-list celebrities. I don't think you
Yes.
probably weren't thinking of that.
well, I mean, they're more famous than we are, so
Yeah.
I guess I can't really judge. So tonight, I believe, is the opening of the season of the Muni. Again, Bring It On is the first show. So people who have their season tickets are getting excited and geared up and hoping for a dry night as well. And
Monique
so-
is going Sunday, I think.
Is she? Does she have season tickets
Yes.
for the whole season? And does she kind of switch around between kids or friends she takes with her?
Yes, and not me. But I'm working.
Well, do you ask to go, Frank?
No.
Okay.
I think what's the one you wanted me to go to?
Jersey Boys.
Yeah, I think I am committed to that one.
I think you'll like it, but I could be wrong. But you sound like you sometimes make your tone of voice is like, oh, musical, and then you'll talk with great animation about how much you loved Waitress on Broadway or how
That
much
was
you
good.
loved X, Y, or Z show. So I think you
Yeah.
like it a little more than you like to admit
All right, we'll
sometimes. But the soundbite of the day today, Mike Isaacson was on the 314 podcast with our friend and regular contributor Sarah Fensky, and I thought their exchange was interesting. the ocean liner metaphor for St. Louis. And he talks about that a little bit earlier in the conversation, how a lot of people thought that the Muni's time had passed and that it wasn't worth the money and the effort. And
Really?
even though
There was a time period where people thought that.
and because the amount of money it was going to take to make some of the necessary repairs, the making it appealing to a new generation of audiences as the audiences were kind of aging out. And by all estimations, I think they've done that. So his point is, if we can do it with a Muni, we can do it with the whole town. We just have to get on board together.
You know that Explore St. Louis, our tourism kind of agency, I guess, they do that celebrity-driven advertising, and they have people like John Goodman and Jenna Fisher and Andy Cohen. I'm wondering, when they get those people to do that, do you think they're paid, or do you think they just, hey, I'm worth so much money, I want to help out my old hometown?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, there's a part of me that would hope if they have more money, then they know what to do with it. And then altruistically, they would say, I love my hometown enough to come back. Certainly, John Hamm comes back and does things to support things in the St. Louis community, including his alma mater, John Burroughs, and some other charities that are near and dear to some of his alumni friends.
And I like Joe Buck is a perfect example of somebody who's done really well, that does a lot of stuff, that people don't know about. Like when the St. Louis Sports Commission is trying to land something really big, like a gymnastics championship or an NCAA regional or wrestling, Joe will voice it and, get involved in stuff, or I think he's been at presentations before.
Yes.
So.
Our friend Julie Buck, who turned 39 yesterday again, and had a birthday that she got to share with Father's Day this year. She got to go out because Joe, apparently, she can't give all the details yet because I don't think it's aired. Joe raised some serious money for St. Louis Children's Hospital on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire celebrity version that he did recently. And she got to go out for the taping. And it sounds like it was really fun. But again, there's a lot of charities in the world he could have picked. And I'm pretty proud that that's the one that he decided to do so much good for as well.
Joe's the best.
Yeah. Think about how much Bob Costas has done through the years for
the hospital.
Yeah.
Period.
Exactly. And for St. Louis. So
let me tell you one thing, how one quick Costas story, that he is really a genuinely just nice fellow and so conscientious. He called me the last week. He says, I cannot help this woman out who needs me for this charity. Could you please do this for me? I mean, he goes out of his way to he doesn't want to say, no, I'm not going to do it. Goodbye. So he calls me to do it. I mean, there was just something so sweet about it.
Okay. Then tell us, inquiring minds want to know.
Oh, I'm not going to get it.
You don't have that same sense of wanting to help other people in the same way. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm going to probably do it. So, but yeah,
that's great. That's Bob. Where is Bob Costas living these days?
Do you know where Charlie Harper lived in 2.5 Men, the most beautiful part of the world?
Like that big house in California?
You know the city?
Where is he?
Even sounds cool.
I thought it was L.A., but
Malibu.
Oh, Malibu.
Yeah, Bob's in that area.
Oh, wow. Oh, has he ever said, Frank, you need just a little weekend getaway, come out here and hang out with the stars with me?
No, but I did do that in New York once, coming out of college before I got a job. I think I told you that. Yeah. So, but no, not like that.
No, wait, I don't think I do know that story, actually.
Well, I didn't have a job. I had graduated from UMSL. I was panicking like there's no tomorrow. Oh my God, I'm never going to get a job. And he said, why don't you come out to New York for the weekend? So,
and you'd interned for him in college?
Yes, at KMOX, and we'd kept up. And so I went and stayed at his condominium in New York and had dinner with Pete Axtell, the sports editor of Newsweek, Terry Cashman, who did Talking Baseball. We went to NBC, did all these cool things. And then that night, this is really embarrassing, but that night we went to this unbelievable restaurant. And I was always a milk experience guy, where I would never leave a dinner table or go to bed without having the milk experience, where you'd have something sweet and drink the milk. Mm-hmm. So we're at this restaurant and I gobbled this big thing of milk and I put it down and I realized it had that stuff in it that made it was sour. So I went back we all went back, and he was on one end of the condo and I was on the other. I threw up 9 times. And I tried to do it as quietly as possible because I didn't want him to think, God, that little dork's throwing up all over the place. And so, yeah, I'll never forget that.
Oh, boy. Did it change your desire to have milk at the end of every single meal?
When you get older, lactose comes in. So I know I don't drink milk anymore. Do you drink milk?
I don't drink milk except for in my tea as much as I probably should. My bones probably want me to drink a little bit more milk than I do.
Yeah. Connor, you a milk guy?
No. I don't know anyone that drinks milk.
Really? You think so?
No.
The amount of milk consumed nowadays is a lot less than, say, 40 years ago?
Maybe, but like, I'm sure it's in stuff. I have milk in things.
Yeah,
but
but
like,
not a big
I'm not
walk-
like just drinking a big glass of milk
Yeah.
after dinner.
But when I raised my kids, we sure had milk every night for dinner. All four of us did, because that was just kind of part of how I'd grown up, and I just thought that's the beverage you have at dinner time.
Is that a sales pitch by the dairy industry as well, that it's good for your bones? I can't imagine the calcium in milk is really that much that it's good for your bones.
We got to research. Well, it's
We gotta
Dr.
do some
Rick that.
research.
We will
Yeah.
ask Dr. Rick that
well,
tomorrow.
how dorky is it after being in the Indy 500 in sweltering heat in that car with that outfit? The first thing you do when you win is you drink a glass of milk. That's the last thing I'd want to do, you know? Give me some Gatorade or water. you know?
Well, and remember back in the old time, at the end of a newscast, right? When I'm talking in the 1950s, when there was still a connection between promoting the newscast, sometimes the anchors would be asked to smoke a particular kind of cigarette at the end of the newscast to promote it and say this newscast was brought to you. And then in many cases, it was drink a glass of milk at the end of the newscast as well. And people would tell the stories about the milk not being the freshest after being out there with all the
God,
lights.
yeah.
Sour milk and a cigarette. I mean, it's a great way to end a newscast.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yum.
Sounds great.
Yeah, here's a more appetizing conversation for you guys. Here's something that is definitely appetizing, and I think we can all get behind, whether or not we get behind the consumption of dairy products or not, and that is Miller Furniture. Fourth generation family owned business. And the thing that's fun about talking to Mark Miller, who's the current generation running the business now, is he has so much pride in what it is that his grandfather did and generations even beyond that did to build this business. And he has this incredible energy and vigor around not only making sure that it lasts into the future, but making sure that Miller Furniture is the best it's ever been into the future. And that has included expanding the number of locations to Fairview Heights, Lake St. Louis at the Meadow Shopping Center, Ellisville off Manchester Road, in addition to that flagship location in Belleville, Illinois. Why did they want to go? They want to make sure that you are never far from being able to drive to your area and to your local area to walk through the aisles and peruse the incredibly well-made American-made furniture that Miller has. They pride themselves on having high-quality furniture. They also understand that it needs to be priced at the best price possible for you to be able to bring it home and have it for generations to come. Reach out today to Miller Furniture at millerfurniture.com to take a look at all the different beautiful furniture they have, but better yet, take the time to visit them at one of their area locations and tell them that we sent you.
And now, Kate
story from yesterday at the Bommarito 500, which the racing was really fun, and I do love people watching, as you guys know well. And at one point, we're sitting down, and on one side of us are folks that are there, and I'm talking like tattooed all the way up with piercings everywhere, and just having a great time. And it was really fun. And I look over, and to the left of us, I'm not exaggerating, there was a guy with an ascot on, right?
Huh.
And so I was like, wow, we really have this. Turns out he was a European journalist who was there because, of course, some of the racers were from Europe. But I loved it. I thought this is what makes this so fun, is it attracts such a variety
Yes.
of people.
There were people there from Japan. There were people there from Mexico. A lot of them to see Pato O'Ward, who almost won the race. He finished second. But yeah, they had a nice eclectic crowd.
Yeah, for sure. I
Or
mean, I think
diverse.
that's the fun part. It really was. I thought that was great. We have had, I know you've mentioned it a couple times, but boy, we get a lot of texters that still want to hear the name of the pizza place that you talked about in opening
Noto.
dialogue. Yeah. And
Yes.
it's just NOTO, right?
Yeah.
That's easy. Somebody else weighing in, because we talked about best patio in St. Louis. Molly's in Soulard gets a vote. Somebody else saying they agree with you. I love Caitlin Clark and everything she stands for, not only basketball. In a conversation with Anina Mannion on taking a look at politics from the political science perspective, military salute was wonderful. Our service members deserve to be celebrated. The riots have been horrific, people behaving badly, and those protesters in St. Louis should have gone to help tornado victims. Congress does not do its job. Congress is failing us. And somebody else saying that they do not like the idea of Josh Hawley running for president. They think he's a seditious insurrectionist, full stop.
Yeah, that's the way the other side would paint him, no doubt about it.
Somebody else saying I'd vote for Charles Manson before Gavin Newsom. And yeah, so per usual, you guys have some interesting ideas back and forth on perspectives, like much of the country seem to be split down 50-50. Somebody said, why didn't they sell out the Bommarito 500? I thought it seemed pretty full, but you know better about that than I do.
There's another section of seats that they do not sell out. Their goal is to fill out that main strip. Now, in that other section, what they're doing right now, and Curtis and I talked about it late last night after the show, that they're going to start putting in these boxes, these suites, and that's how they think they can sell that section out.
Ah, very cool. Hey, we're going to talk a little bit more. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this.
The University of Missouri St. Louis offers academic programs at the undergraduate,
from Lorenzo's last week and said they'd been inspired and reminded that they hadn't been there for a minute, went this weekend and said, boy, not only did they deliver, they over-delivered. It was even better than they'd remembered.
That's awesome. I think that we brought up Kuna, and one of the real success stories with Kuna is Cyberg's. They've been hand in hand throughout the successful run of Cyberg's restaurants. And I got to tell you, Cyberg sponsors our segment with Andy Van Slyke on Monday nights on the Control Option Press Box. And we just appreciate them being a part of KTRS and the family.
So that's folks can expect to hear from Andy today. Did he have anything? I love when I walk by and you guys are doing the interviews in there. He's always so animated. It makes me want to hear what it is he has strong feelings about on this
Yes, he
particular
has strong
day.
feelings about a lot of things.
Can you give us a hint about what we're going to hear some strong feelings about tonight?
About Ryan Helsley, some more thoughts about Jordan Walker. He feels good about some players too. He just is in love with Ivan Herrera, thinks Nolan Gorman's got a chance. And, you know, when you played the game at his level, five-time Gold Glover, 3-time All-Star, and then watch it with so much passion, he's going to come out with some great opinions.
And we have one of your best friends coming on the show tomorrow, Rick Horton.
Yes, there could not be a nicer guy in the media. I think the toughest thing to do in St. Louis would be find somebody who doesn't like Rick Horton. I don't know if you could. So he's also in a movie. Yes, Rick Horton was actually in a major motion picture, Field of Dreams, because there's a scene where the television is on and he's on the mound in the background. And I think, I'm not sure if it was a negative moment for him or a positive moment, but he says, you know, a lot of people think it's Kevin Costner, but I was actually in that movie.
Okay, so Connor, you help us and our aging feeble minds to remember to ask him about that tomorrow, because I want to hear how that experience.
So they used a real game footage clip on a TV.
Yeah, like the TV was on in the background. Yeah. It was actually Rick Horton on the hill.
That's fun. From the 636, we were talking a little bit earlier about the Muni and opening night tonight. This is a great one. I've had my Muni seats for 40 years. Don't you love how many people have had them for that long? It's one of my favorite things about it. I love theater. Got my season tickets as a high school graduation gift. I'm now in my mid-50s, so very young, and hope to pass these on to my grandchildren. Isn't that a great story?
Awesome.
That's a good idea to give somebody Muni tickets as high school graduation.
Yeah.
What a good way to maybe get them to come back to St. Louis after they're done it with college too.
Another text went to Bezzetta's in the Valley on Saturday. It was delicious. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
That is good to hear.
Yeah, because another guest that we had not too long ago. I really like this text. If I was giving a text of the day, I might award it to this one. What do you think of this? 314. Can't we have a political party that's really just for the good of the people?
Boy, that would solve everything, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think that's.
I don't think we can at this stage.
I don't know. A lot of people are starting to really question the two-party system, and you know, I don't know that it's going to change, but I think that's a sentiment that more and more people seem to be expressing for sure. Tomorrow's show, we mentioned that we're going to have a good friend and former Cardinals player, as well as current Cardinals broadcaster, Rick Horton on. He's going to tell us about a important organization to our city and to a lot of athletes in our city that is celebrating 60 years. You're going to want to hear about that. Dr. Rick Mann, he's got a lot of stuff that's sort of breaking news on the cancer front and on the health front. We're going to be talking about that with Rick.
Milk.
And milk. We're going to ask him about milk.
I found an article from a researcher that said it's not as important. So you gotta ask him.
Okay, we're going to ask Dr. Rick about milk. We're going to ask Rick Horton about his movie career, and then of course Joe Holloman. Lots of stuff to talk to him about on the local political front as well.
All right. We just had a fire alarm go off here.
Okay, well, hopefully it's a false alarm, but that's John and that's the Carney Show's problem to deal with now because we're almost off the air, but we probably should check that out. Okay, we'll be right back after the news, everybody.